Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 12, Police and the Juvenile. I'm Dr. Sirianni. Okay, moving on. Cops and kids. The police have more positive attitudes today towards youthful offenders than in the past. I think back to when I was a kid, I'll say. I always had respect. So it's interesting that the text would say more positive attitudes today um, than the past. I don't know. I just think that it depends upon the area where you're at. As I said before, it depends upon the demographics, the situations. So for this to be a blanket statement, I don't know. I'm a little unclear on it, but that's what the text says. Police occupational determinants affect those attitudes. Well, what they mean by that is what we in law enforcement are being trained to do, to be more understanding, sensitive, compassionate. We're not robots. We're not out there to kick butt and take people to jail. That's just not our job. Juveniles are more salvageable than adults. Again, I feel that I understand their point in this. I think that because they're young, they're impressionable, but I still think that it's too much of a pointed statement. And what I mean by that is, what about juveniles who are 17, 16 and a half, 17, that honestly have made their decision as to the type of life they want to lead? At that point, are they salvageable? Absolutely. But more salvageable? I don't know. Juveniles can be hostile to the police as adults can be. Well, of course. The importance of police-juvenile relations cannot be minimalized. Well, here we are in Chapter 12, and I've said this all the way through. It does lay on your shoulders quite often. You can't be the robotic cop out there saying, I'm going to make 5 arrests today. I'm going to dump them off and let the courts deal with them. Oh, no, you can't do that. Juveniles who have contact with the police have more negative attitudes towards them than those with no contact. I think that goes with all of the public. Remember, we only deal with maybe a 0.5%, and I use that figure, not exactly, but as an estimate to show you that 99.9 or 5, whatever it may be in your community, they're good people. You never make contact with them. You may stop them on a traffic stop once in a great while and maybe write them a warning, but you probably won't see that person ever again. And that old lady who called you for the first time in her life because her mailbox got hit, she's paid her taxes. She's always voted in favor of your raises, and all of a sudden, well, she's got a great opinion of what you do. So I would say that, yeah, juveniles who have had no contact, that does make sense, but it goes on to all of us. Most youths appear to have positive attitudes toward police. Okay. Processing of juvenile offenders. When responding to juvenile lawbreakers, police are influenced by a variety of individual, sociocultural, and organizational factors. Again, it depends upon where you are. And what the definition of lawbreakers. Are they riding their skateboards on a sidewalk near a business? Or are they committing a robbery? You see the difference? It really depends. And yeah, police are influenced by a variety of individual socio-cultural and organizational factors, if I could speak well this morning. Yeah, it depends, case by case basis. They can choose more or less restrictive response to an individual offender. Well, and I'll give you an example. When I used to go out in an area in my city where a lot of kids on the weekends and in the summers would have bonfires and have parties, and we would go out because at some points there were hundreds of kids. Well, if we came across some kids and they were having some beers and they were respectful, they weren't running from us, they weren't trashing the place and light the woods on fire, dump your alcohol out, get out of here. Or depending upon the demeanor of the group, maybe we call parents. It's not always that you have to make arrests. So, police discretion. I showed this video in my Principles of Law Enforcement class, and it's about 10 minutes, but it's really worth watching, and what attitude can do to change what we do. So let's watch this.
With Fidelity Wealth Management, you
Just
get
takes a minute.
straightforward advice, tailored recommendations, tax-efficient investing strategies, and a dedicated advisor to help you grow and protect your wealth. Fidelity Wealth Management.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Chip Huth, and I've been a law enforcement officer for the past 24 years. And for most of that time, I have policed problems, not people. As we're all aware, law enforcement has come under deep scrutiny in the wake of recent significant events in our country. Some of these high-profile events have contributed to a lack of trust in the police on the part of many community members. And for most of my career, I've been part of that problem. But over the last several years in Kansas City, we've been on a journey learning to apply new ways of policing that have been transformational, particularly for me and the members of my team. With the real urgency to find solutions to our biggest problems, I want to share how this transformation occurred for us and what it has meant in Kansas City. I'm here because I know what has happened with us can happen anywhere. When I first became a SWAT team member, our city's West Side community was deeply burdened with high-volume crime. Many businesses had relocated and the streets resembled open sewers. Most of the criminals blended in with groups of undocumented workers and preyed on them and other citizens who were too fearful to cooperate with the police. At one point, our SWAT team was brought in with a mandate to clean it up. We adopted a zero-tolerance policy toward crime of any kind, but the situation continued to decline. We policed the neighborhood heavily. We wrote tickets and made arrests for any violation we observed, no matter how minor. We were fishing with a net instead of a spear, and many hard-working community members got caught up in the sweeps meant to discourage the criminals. Despite our work, the crime rate increased, and because of our work, some community members began to see us as the enemy. I remember one critical thinking officer approaching me and asking, "Chip, you do realize what we're doing isn't working, right?" To which I replied, "Yes, of course I realize it isn't working, but we're the police, and this is what we do." It was my narrow-mindedness that invited community members to complain more and cooperate less. A few years later, I was promoted and had the opportunity to lead a SWAT team of my own. I brought the same mindset I had employed on the West Side with me, and it wasn't long before that team was one of the most complained upon units in the entire department. I was equal parts blind to the needs of the community and the potential of my team. It was in the middle of all this that we encountered the ideas of the Arbinger Institute. Through a partnership with the Institute and our Leadership Academy, we began to ask a question. Do we really see the people we're policing as people? As we started to ask ourselves this question, our team members started to consider what it might be like to be policed by us. As our collective mindset began to shift, so did our results. Let me illustrate with a few quick stories. Our team encounters many aggressive dogs during search warrant service operations. Aggressive dogs pose obvious dangers to the team, and the primary way for the team to address them was to shoot them. This made the owners of the animals predictably angry and sad. Relating to the dog owners, one squad member asked this question of our team. He said, "What if we could serve a warrant on your house without shooting your dog? Would you want us to?" Well, many of the team members are pet owners, so you can imagine what the answer was. This one question led us to embed a dog expert with our team to learn our jobs and to teach us about dog behavior. We also implemented additional technology to capture and restrain aggressive animals. This initiative to date has resulted in an 80% reduction in dogs being shot on search warrant executions in Kansas City, Missouri. Our team utilizes patrol wagons to escort suspects to jail. These wagons are essentially vans that have been converted to haul prisoners. A couple of officers were operating these wagons, noticed that people were complaining about the excessive heat in the summer months. As a result, they were often angry and unruly, and when they got to jail, they caused disturbances with the detention people. The wagon drivers listened to the complaints of these folks, and they actually did an investigation themselves. They took it upon themselves to look into this. They discovered the cabins of the patrol wagons could heat up to dangerous levels on some days. But because of the modifications made to the vehicle, cool air could not be effectively pumped into the prisoner compartment. These officers went to the local hardware store and purchased PVC pipe and duct tape with money out of their own wallets. They used the duct tape to attach one end of the PVC pipe to the air conditioner vents in the driver's compartment, ran the other end of the pipe through the metal mesh into the back of the prisoner's compartment. This made it possible to push cool air into the back of the wagon, providing relief from the heat to the suspects as they were being transported to the detention facility. As we started to see people we were policing more and more as people who mattered the way we mattered, it began to affect what we did as we responded to unique situations in ways we could not have conceived of when we were operating from an inward mindset. One summer day, our team chased a violent fugitive into an apartment complex. The man hid in the ceiling of one of the apartments, requiring us to evacuate the entire building. One family was in the middle of making dinner, and in their rush to get to safety, they weren't able to turn off the stove. Once the building was evacuated, we were able to enter the ceiling space and capture the suspect without endangering the residents. A detective assigned to our team noticed the ruined dinner on the family stove. He took inventory of everything that was wasted and left the scene as we began the process of letting folks back into their homes. About 30 minutes later, that detective returned with an armful of groceries, which he delivered to the family whose dinner was ruined. The detective had used his personal credit card to replace every single item on the family's dinner menu. One day we were asked by the homicide unit to serve a warrant on a house looking for a couple of murder suspects. We did our homework on the residents, I briefed the team, and we rolled out. As we made the block, we were immediately compromised by lookouts. Our breacher took the front door off the hinges with a battering ram, and we made our way into the living room. What we encountered on the other side of that door was complete pandemonium. There were approximately 25 people with small children and infants in the home. Toddlers were literally clinging to our legs as we made our way through the house. There were minutes of chaos as we rounded everybody up and consolidated them into a dining room that had been furnished with 3 couches. I tried to address the group, however, with several small children screaming and mothers frantically trying to calm them. The best I could do was try to go from person to person to explain why we were there. It was about that time I noticed that my point man was missing. I decided I was going to try to find him. I imagined he had found some quiet place somewhere in the house to call the detectives. I walked into the kitchen, and there he was, in full tactical gear, standing at the sink, mixing baby bottles. He just looked at me and smiled and kind of shrugged, and he went out to the dining room and began distributing the baby bottles to the mothers of the crying infants. This one act of responsiveness changed the entire scene. Everyone calmed down, and we were able to explain the situation thoroughly and turn the 2 suspects over to the detectives smoothly, all because this officer was able to be responsive in a stressful situation. No behavioral mandate, new policy, or technology prescription can change the way we see others. Nor can these sterile measures equip officers with the ability to adapt in the moment to provide the approach each unique situation requires. The change in the way we see can not only transform a single situation, but can transform an entire community. Let me take you back to the West Side, where 2 officers there began to see people as people. After we had abandoned the zero tolerance policies on the West Side, the main responsibility for policing the community fell to 2 officers. These officers engaged community leaders with humility and an open mind. They abandoned positions and focused on the shared interests of the neighborhood and the police department. They began by acknowledging the personhood of each member of the community. They saw them as people who counted. This shift in mindset opened up possibilities never before considered. They worked to build trust with all community members. They began to differentiate between the day laborers who wanted to work and those who hid among them that were responsible for the majority of the crime in the neighborhood. These officers helped devise a system where the men seeking work had to report to a community center, where they were issued ID cards and provided with food, coffee, restroom facilities, and a place to shower. Those who weren't picked up for work on a given day were dispatched out into the community to perform neighborhood services. These 2 officers worked right alongside of them, clearing brush, painting houses, and even helping neighborhood matriarchs make tamales, all the while building critical relationships that were leveraged to help instill security, safety, and prosperity back into the community. The criminals with ill intent became easy to identify, and the community began willingly cooperating with the efforts to reduce crime and disorder as their fear of the police dissipated. These two officers worked with the community members and fellow officers to drive the crime rate to an all-time low and achieve a national success story that was made possible by a mindset shift that allowed them to see those in the community as people, with individual hopes, needs, fears, and dreams. A bank, restaurants, and other neighborhoods and other businesses move back into the neighborhood, and the community is engaged and supportive of the police. We are facing a huge challenge, and we must face it together. The solution is simple: changing our mindset more than mandating new behaviors, deploying new technologies, or implementing new policies is what is needed. This mindset shift helped our SWAT team capture more illegal drugs and guns in a 3-year period than we had in the previous decade, while at the same time transforming from the most complained on unit in the department to receiving 0 community complaints in 6 years. Just to recap, that represents a 3-fold increase in productivity and a 100% reduction in community complaints. Believe me, if we can do it, anyone can. Thank you very much for the gift of your time.
Okay. I know it's kind of long, but well worth a watch. What a success story. So what is it? We know what it's not, right? And we know how to correct it. But it can be defined. Discretion can be defined as a choice a police officer makes between 2 or more possible means of handling a situation. And that's why I showed this video. What a great example. Discretion needs to be both professional and personal. Not shooting the dogs if you can avoid it. Making baby bottles. The AC in the van. Little things. Just talking to people. Discretion is important for the police actually act as a court of first instance in initially categorizing a juvenile. You know what that means? Police actually act as a court of first instance. In other words, we set the tone. We set how things start. We start the process for a successful completion, not only of the case, but of the outcome, because we're there to try to eliminate that delinquent act and future delinquent acts from that individual or individuals. Police discretion. Okay. Informal and formal dispositions. A patrol officer or juvenile officer or a juvenile officer has at least 5 options when investigating a complaint against a juvenile or arriving at the scene of a law violating behavior. Warning and release. Station adjustment. In other words, I caught your kid making a mess, or maybe he had some beers on him and I brought him to the station, call the parents. Deal with it. Hope I don't see him again. No charges this time. Referral to a diversion agency. In other words, drug court, probation, and the list goes on. How about a citation, a referral to juvenile court? Instead of taking them physically to jail, maybe they need some type of intervention and you write a criminal court date and they need to show up at that court date. And of course, detention. In some instances, as we know, we watch the news, some kids just need to be locked up. They're a danger to society. All right, so some factors influencing discretion. The factors are on the left. All right, so the offense, how serious it is. Citizen complaints. Gender. Girls are less likely to be referred to the court unless they violate traditional role expectations for girls, which we covered. Race. Socioeconomic status. In the midst of conflicting evidence, lower class youngsters do appear to receive different justice. Is it right? Absolutely not. You know, are they confined to compartment or apartment complexes because of their socioeconomic status of their parents? In other words, they can't afford to live in the suburbs. So the 99% of them who are doing nothing get that negative effect from that 1% in their apartment complex who are out there selling drugs, raising heck, hurting people, robbing, and cops are there all the time. Individual characteristics of the juvenile. And then police-juvenile interactions. Are they positive? Are you pulling off the road when you see kids throwing a frisbee or a football and saying, hey, how you guys doing? and maybe thrown it a couple times. How you guys doing? You guys live here? Yeah, we live down the road. We come to the park all the time. Maybe you get a call and say, all right, hey, listen, I got to go. You guys have a great day. If you don't think that has a positive impact, you're wrong. How about demeanor? The demeanor of the youth has influence in this process. Police officers' personality. Well, I just gave you an example. Department policy and external pressures, a number of external pressures, such as police attitude, can influence the disposition of juvenile misdemeanors. Well, I've responded to all different types of areas. And I'll give you an example. The kid skateboarding on the sidewalk, as I told you, maybe it's in front of a market, and the owners of the businesses call the police. Hey, you know what? I don't want anything to happen to them. Just tell them they're going to hurt somebody or hurt themselves. Please tell them to go skate someplace else. And then you get called for kids skateboarding through a closed complex in a golf course where everybody's is an affluent area, and they want the kids locked up. They want parents called. They want fines. They want everything done. It's the external pressures can be very varying, to say the least. All right, so legal rights of juveniles. In the 1960s, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision began to change the relationship between the police and juveniles. Today, juveniles who are under arrest have nearly all the due process safeguards as adults, as they should, but it wasn't always that way. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects citizens from unauthorized search and seizure. For example, in Mapp v. Ohio in 1961, the court affirmed Fourth Amendment rights for adults, stating that evidence gathered in an unreasonable search and seizure was inadmissible in court. In State versus Lowry in 1967, the Supreme Court applied the Fourth Amendment ban against unreasonable searches and seizures to juveniles. It took them 6 years later to realize that they should have done that, but hey, at least it was done. How about interrogation practices? The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution affirms that police must adhere to standards of fairness and due process in obtaining confessions. The same goes for kids as adults. Current standards also require that the courts take into consideration the totality of circumstances under which a confession was made in determining the appropriateness of the confession. An example, was it a spontaneous utterance? Did you stop some kids and one of them in the back seat says, "We did the burglaries, I'm sorry, I will never do it again." And the other ones are tight-lipped. Well, that's a spontaneous utterance. There's no pressure. There's no squeezing a kid to get him to talk. They said it. That's just one example. You can read the court cases down below. You're welcome to pause this. Okay. Fingerprinting. Some juvenile court statutes require that a judge approve the taking of fingerprints of juveniles, control access to fingerprint records, and provide for fingerprint destruction under certain circumstances. That circumstance might be expungement. Say a 14-year-old kid gets caught doing a burglary, gets fingerprinted, and after he completes diversion programs, probation, community service, the judge receives everything and says, okay, I hereby order the expungement of all the records. So the prints have to be shredded. Everything has to be gone. Electronic, hard copy, everything gone. So, all right, so down below, search and seizure. Juveniles, like adults, are protected. Interrogation, I gave you an example. Fingerprinting and pretrial identification practices. Same thing for the photographing. Everything related to that case must be gone. Otherwise, you're in big trouble as an agency. All right, the police and prevention of juvenile offenses. 3 ways in which the police departments are attempting to implement community-based policing in the prevention and deterrence of youth crime, and are community-based, school-based, and gang-based. And what that means is that we're spending more time in the community. We're attending meetings, finding out what problems they have. Perhaps they got a group of kids in the neighborhood are just raising all kinds of heck. And we'll go out and deal with it. But we might not have known that and identified the individuals had we not spent the time talking with the community. Same thing goes for the school. That's why we have SROs. What do you see? What do you hear? And gang-based, well, that kind of leads into schools too, and then it goes back outside, which can all tie back in to community-based. Who do you know is the gangbangers? Who do you know? Tell us so we can help. It's all intertwined. And there's examples right there. So, police activities to combat delinquency. Well, at the top, we can develop relationships with juveniles so that they can become connected with police officers and feel that they are being treated fairly. To the left, develop and evaluate prevention programs, especially for pre-delinquent use. And what that means is the young, impressionable, are they going to be swayed to go and be a gang member because they're impressionable and they have no other place to go? We step in. All right, bottom left, expand the ways in which police work with the community to deal with juvenile problems, which we mentioned. To the right, avoid any form of abusive treatment of juveniles. That goes without saying. And to the bottom right, do not target certain juveniles to avoid making them heroes to their peers. Now, sometimes you got to separate them out from the group because some are worse than others. So I agree, but I disagree. All right, so both juveniles and adults have constitutional protections. That juveniles can be as hostile to the police as adults can be. That armed juveniles are as dangerous as armed adults. That both juveniles and adults are involved in gangs, some of which are involved in drug trafficking, and that alcohol and drugs affect the functioning of both juveniles and adults. And what this means is, we've talked about how to help kids. We've talked about what to do. But if you're aware of the Ferguson effect, and we've covered that in previous classes, and what that is that incident with the shooting and the riots, and cops were worried about acting. They were worried about putting hands on because of the videos, and the media is only going to show part of what the actual true story was, and they were demonized. Well, I want you to focus on kids and helping them, but I also want you to go home. Don't misunderstand me that all kids need a shake. They need help. Well, they do, but some are very dangerous. So you need to watch your back. You need to protect yourself. All right, so Project DARE. Hundreds of communities in the 1990s and early 2000s have dropped the DARE program due to budgetary concerns, but the debate whether to continue funding has been waged both nationally and internationally. In my city, they dropped DARE from the schools. Drug use and possession went up like 40 or 50%. 5 years later, I went in as the assistant chief with the budget proposal and begged for it to come back. And guess what? It helped. It should have never been removed in the first place. I get this little commercial here.
Drugs. Some of the big kids do them. So it's tough for us younger now. But my mom and dad helped get this DARE anti-drug program in our school.
I'm sorry.
It's run by specially trained police.
Now we're saying no to drugs.
Just say no. Be your own best friend. Just
Get DARE in your kid's school too by visiting Country Style Donuts. Purchase the DARE Bear and show you care. Proceeds go to DARE in your community.
An old commercial. It's an oldie but a goodie, I'll tell you. But it works. It's successful if taught right. And we had great instructors. The SROs were DARE instructors certified, and it worked. Well, and it's back in a lot of places. All right, so I got a final thought. I want you to think about some things. And you know what? I'm guilty of a lot of this. And I show this not only for you, but for me. It reminds me to stay focused. Because we're all human. Heck, I mess up all the time. Try to slow down, folks. Because life goes by quick. You realize you're 50. Believe me, I can't believe it. I'm almost 50 years old, and I would never have thought that was going to happen in the beginning of my career. Sorry, it's videos. help any way I can. Just try to stay focused. Hey, I know online classes are hard. I try to make them more interesting. I can only do as much as I can do. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. You guys have a great, great day at least, okay, and a great week. See ya.